Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to explain to you what hard coding is in Excel. Someone posted a post on LinkedIn about hard coding, and it was a poll and all the rest of it involved. And I got one or two, actually more than two, I think it was about three messages from people saying they've seen this post. They don't quite understand what hard coding is. What do they mean by that? Why is it a good thing? Why is it a bad thing? So I'll do my best to explain. Now, hard coding it's a terminology that comes from coding from computer programming, but it also applies to Excel, where what do they mean by hard coding is actually typing a value into a formula rather than a reference to another cell. So let me explain that in a little bit more detail. Hopefully this will make sense. Here you can actually see what the formula is. I don't look up here because that's just showing it as text, but if you actually look in the cell, you can see equals 6 times 15 equals K9 by times K10. So in a situation where, for example, you're charging £50 an hour and you're working for 6 hours, how much is that? £300. That's what we're trying to calculate. But there are two ways of doing that formula. The first way is actually putting in equals 6 times 50, because there you've got the 6, which is the number of hours, and there you've got the 50, which is the rate. And then if you put it in like that, equals 6 times 50, it tells you £300. In the green cell, I've got equals K9, which is the 6, times by K10, which is the 50. So it's essentially doing the same thing. It's using the same values, but one of them is you put the values straight into the formula, which is called hard coding. And the other one, where you're actually referencing other cells, is not considered hard coding. So hard coding basically means that you've put the data straight into the formula rather than putting it into another cell and referencing that cell in the formula. So why is hard coding bad? And the person who did the post said that you shouldn't be doing hard coding at all. There are one or two situations where you might be getting away with it, and I'll explain that in a minute. But first, let me show you why it's not preferable. The reason why it's not preferable is if you've done, here we've got one formula, which is 6 times 50. We could go back to this. Let's just say, for argument's sake, we actually now on the next day, we want to do 7 hours or 5 hours, or 3 hours, or we want to increase the rate to £60 or 55 or whatever. We now have to go and find this formula, go into the formula and change the relevant value. So first of all, that might be a problem, because we may have a value here, for example, of 12 hours, and we might have another 12 somewhere else in the formula, and 112 is actually multiplying up with the number of hours in a day, and the other ones we multiply by the hour rate or something like that. So you may have different 12s in, and then you don't know which ones to go and change. The other problem is you might have a formula. You may have you might have 5 or 6 formulas all referring to this hourly rate, and then you've got to go and try and find all the ones that have the text of 50 in it, and some might have 50 for other reasons, and you don't know which ones to change, and it really becomes a headache. Whereas if it's not hard coded and you're actually referencing the cell and you do need to change it, all you can do is come here and change that 50 to 60, and it updates automatically. That's one change. Otherwise, you've got to go through all the references where you've referenced that cell and hard coded. You've got to go and change each one. It becomes sloppy, it becomes messy, it becomes massively prone to errors. And quite frankly, you can probably forget a few, and it is a massive pain. Whereas when you don't hard code it and you actually reference a cell, provided that cell somewhere where you can find it, it's easy to go and change, and then everywhere that's been referenced, that cell will automatically update. In fact, a lot of the spreadsheets I make, the standard ones, the ready-made ones in the store, you'll find on the intro and setup tab, you'll find various settings. When I make custom spreadsheets, I almost always have a tab called settings, where I put all these little values so that people can go in and change them. So that if, for example, they tell me I charge £50 an hour, and then all of a sudden they want to put their rates up, which is fair, it's bound to happen at some point, then they can simply go and change the rate. Now, I did say at the beginning of the video that there's sometimes a time when hard coding isn't a problem. There's one, if you talk to 10 people who use Excel, they're always going to disagree on this, but there's some times where it's not a problem. Some people just don't hard code anything because they want to get into that routine, and that's fair enough. Personally, there are times when I think you can. So for example, sometimes in a formula, you may have to put in times by 24 or divide by 24 or whatever, if you've got the number of hours in the day. Now, the chances of the number of hours changing how many hours there are in a day is, well, it's not impossible, I suppose, put anything past people, but it's highly unlikely that we're going to change the number of hours in the day. So to actually hard code something like that in, I don't think that's a problem, but other people will actually make a habit of putting in another cell 24 and then dividing by that so that they never hard code. It's probably not a bad practice to get into, not hard coding at all. However, just think to yourself when you're doing a formula, what are the chances of any of these values changing? And if there's even the slimmest chance that they're going to change, then what I would suggest doing is not hard coding it, putting a reference and making sure that you've got that ready to go. Otherwise, if there's no chance in changing, feel free to hard code. So I hope that that helps you. Thank you very much and goodbye.